place. How you doing, Arlen?
I'm doing just fine. I'm kind of worried about this election that's coming up way too fast. And I really worry, that Trump could possibly win. And I don't know why the race is that close. It shouldn't be, in my opinion, but it is. So it worries me. And also the Congress, the understanding that I've gotten is that Republicans are probably going to control the Senate. And that to me is really bad, because if Kamala won and nominates somebody for the Supreme Court or a judgeship, Republicans will just say, no, we're not going to let that person be nominated. So,
there's a lot of things to be worried about. You're watching Halitics. We've got Arlen with us. Arlen, one thing that worries me is that you're surprised that the race is so close. I mean, you've been on my program for well over a year now. I've given you all the reasons that so many people don't feel Kamala Harris, that they don't support the Democrats. And they're good reasons. Now, they may not convince you that Trump would be a better president than she is. They don't convince me. But there are arguments out there, and they're understandable given the kind of challenges we face and the failure of the Democrats when they have power to address them or to do anything but make them often worse. So I don't know why it can surprise. I saw this online. I saw another poster who expressed real confusion about why Trump is, I guess it's a dead heat right now, or virtually a dead heat. I have to say she's slight. I think she still has Harris the slight edge. But I don't know why it surprises you.
It surprises me, Hal, because Trump, all he does is lie, make up stories, act crazier and crazier. To me, I think he's definitely got some mental impairments that will only going to get worse the older he gets. And the crazier he gets. I mean, he's out of control, really, and yet he gets away with saying whatever he wants to say, and it never seems to hurt him.
But elections, and I've often said this, Arlen, elections are indeed choices, right? And if there's two really bad choices, of course, now we're having trouble with the slide deck. If there are two really bad choices, then shouldn't we expect that people will be, won't know what to do, and will be feel kind of like, what's the word? Those mice, they get a shock. They click a little button or something, and they get a pellet one time and a shock the other, and they just become completely, they don't know what to do. They go crazy themselves. And it seems like the American public have been subject to this kind of gaslighting for generations or decades anyway. So I don't know why you're surprised when you look at what the Democrats have done to this country. And when you consider how bad Trump is, it certainly doesn't surprise me either that he's having trouble mustering any real support.
Well, I don't think the Republicans have done anything. And Kamala Harris, is not that bad. I mean, she's actually, she's got a lot of experience. She's very capable. She's very confident. She seems like she's rational. She's not crazy like Trump is. She's not making up stories. There's a big difference. I think Trump is out of control. I think his mind is going, and I think he would be really dangerous. And those who are behind him, if they became the majority, they would do some pretty awful things, I think, with the courts and everything else to make it really tough on Democrats.
All right, real quick, we're going to center Palestine, Israel, as I always do on my program. But just to back up what Arlen and I are talking about right now, here's the latest poll results. I actually struck through, Arlen, with the red marker. The two polls I think are really not worth considering on this chart. The Rasmussen poll, which is always very strongly Republican leaning, and the Morning Consult, which is just kind of they just kind of track. It's a tracker. It's not really where they call people every, week or what have you. They just sort of follow up on the same people. So those two seem to me not credible or not reliable, but all the others these are high-end polls. Maybe the Yahoo you could throw out. Otherwise, they're all outstanding pollsters. And what they show is somewhere between a tie and +3 Harris. So I'm willing to say that's about where it is. I don't think it's exactly even. If it was even, you'd see one or two, at least in the popular vote, you'd see one or two. in red. You don't see any in red. You'd see more, really clustered around 0. But this is the problem for Harris. The Electoral College has a bias to the Republicans, so she's got to probably get 2 to 3% win in the popular vote to win the Electoral College, and I don't think she's there right now.
No, and I wonder if these are really the latest, because some of those right now it's the 14th, and the most recent you have there is the 11th. So it could
those are the dates where they made the calls, and this is the most recent on Real Clear Politics. There may be some new ones coming out. The NBC News poll, the 11th. The CBS News came out. I guess they wrapped up the calls on Friday. The NBC News and the CBS News polls were just released. But yeah, this is the latest I've seen. I was checking this morning, so I don't have anything newer. But people are really focusing on that NBC News poll because it shows a tie. But if you throw in the ABC and CBS, still Harris might have a slight lead.
Yeah, there's so much, really unknown going into this, because you don't know how what they'll be doing in the next 3 weeks. We don't know. The Democrats have to really up their game. Harris is going to have to be a little bit stronger, I think. I think she's rather weak, and I'd like to see her assert herself more, make more contrasts with not only Trump, but more contrast with Biden, because, she shouldn't come across as a Biden too. She should be her own person with a few differences, and, just put herself out there more, I think.
Well, we'll get to that in a moment. We're also going to talk about your latest article. You actually have a new content at thebigpicturereport.com. So folks should definitely check that out. We're going to get into Arlen's piece. But as I do, I center the victims of American empire. And that right now are the people in the Middle East, not just Gaza, Lebanon, the West Bank as well. But with the focus on the hottest spot for the Israeli genocide, Gaza, the death toll there, they say 42, 289 martyrs. So the numbers are so astonishingly high. I want to give you the exact the number over the past few days. There we go. Let me fade that in there. And I've got Arlen. See, I got all sorts of problems, Arlen. I was really focusing on getting, I just was having trouble. The stories are so depressing. We talked about this before. It's really heartbreaking to me to see where our country is at this point. So can't always get going in the morning. Let's see, try to get everything looking pretty decent. There you go. From Sana News, this is Syria. 62, they call them martyrs over the past 24 hours. And just to give you the actual, you're still looking a little bit, got to get you right in the middle there, Arlen. I'll center you. Sort of tough sometimes. Yeah, let me center you. There we go. So there is there's Arlen centered, and the numbers pitch up a little bit better there.
I'll tell you what I think is kind of funny, Cal, that the election has pretty much pushed Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, all that off the news pages. I think, I've hardly heard anything the last couple of weeks. And, I don't know for sure what's going on, but it's certainly not as much coverage as there was, more recently. Right now it's pretty quiet.
Yeah, well, that's what the Washington Post said was likely to happen when Israel attacked Lebanon, as there would be less news about Gaza, and perhaps less killing, but that sadly hasn't happened. Israel's managed to kill lots of Lebanese and keep killing just as many Gazans as ever. I guess maybe until they're completely wiped out. So there's your numbers. 62 Sunday, that's yesterday. 169 since Thursday, close to 43,000. And just one more really feel-bad story from the Middle East. I threw this at you yesterday, but we're sending more missiles and now troops. The Harris-Biden administration is sending missiles, a missile defense system anyway. They've sent plenty of missiles in the past, and about 100 American troops to Israel. So do you think this would happen if Kamala Harris, and I got to believe she was in the decision room when this was done, Arlen, if Kamala Harris had said to Biden, listen, we can't do this. We can't amp things up in Israel. We've got to stop this by hook or by crook, or at least come out aggressively against Israel. Do you think Biden would have done this and sent those troops there, which presumably are to provide some kind of logistical support for a war with Iran?
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to know what Israel really is doing right now, because I don't know if they're thinking about our election or not. They may just, being kind of quiet and not fussing over anything and just making sure everything stays about the same until the election's over. I don't know.
No, but I'm asking you whether if Harris had said, forget about Israel, if Harris had said, and by the way, call us in 240-242-5646. If Harris had said, nope, we cannot do this, Joe, we cannot keep supporting Israel, if for no other reason than I could lose Michigan, I could lose Wisconsin, Jill Stein is hammering us every single day in Michigan about this issue. We've got to stop supporting Israel overtly. If she had said that, do you think we would have still sent those troops and the defense system to Israel?
Well, that's very difficult to answer, Hal, because I'm not sure if Biden will, give Kamala any say in these decisions. I mean, he's the president. He's going to be the one responsible, and he may just say, I'll do whatever I want to do. But like you, I would like to see Kamala, be more critical of Israel and what they're doing to the civilians in Gaza. I think she needs to, I think that way she would separate herself a little bit from Biden, who never really criticized Israel. But I think Kamala has been a little bit more critical, and I think she should be a lot more critical about the way that civilians are dying over there. It's just no excuse for it.
Well, they're being targeted. It's not just civilians either. We're seeing journalists targeted. We're seeing children. I mean, they're civilians, obviously, but children are being targeted directly by Israeli soldiers. I guess I have trouble seeing why this wouldn't be a red line for you.
Well, it kind of is. I mean, I'm definitely critical of Israel, and I think they're doing everything wrong. And,
why isn't the Harris support for Israel at this point a red line?
Like I say, I want her to be more critical. I'm not sure how supportive she really is, and I don't know if she has any real wiggle room, really, because she's got to be careful about what she says. She doesn't want to offend and alienate the Jewish community, and maybe lose some support there. So she's in a tough position. I don't know that she could do anything really that'll make a big difference at this point.
Our thought leader, Arlen Grossman, with us. He's a pundit as well. You can see there he blogs at thebigpicturereport.com. And I had a question about thought leader, Arlen. Now, I call you the thought leader. You didn't adopt that moniker, although you've expressed pride in it. Here's something I don't quite get. I looked it up. Is thought leader one word? And according to at least, and this is one reason I posted on Halitics on Facebook, which you should join if you haven't yet, become part of Halitics, that I don't like when people just post long AI answers as though I'm supposed to respond to that, or as though that kind of answers a question. I think you have to use your own words. You have to curate it. I just don't buy what AI tells me. But I asked AI, so this is an example of that, I asked AI, is thought leader one word? And they responded, yes, it is one word. See, it says right there at the top, yes, thought leader is one word. I thought I should ask the thought leader. So here's what I don't understand. If thought leader is one word, why is there a space between the T and the L? Arlen, you see there's a space? One word means there's no space. And I actually even copied it with my cursor and pasted it into my little notepad to see whether maybe there was an optical illusion there and there's really no space between T and L, but there is. So is it one word or isn't it? And I want your thoughts on this. It's very important, by the way.
Of course it is. And I think thought leader definitely looks like it should be two words. Together they make one long word, but it doesn't look right. So
I'm with you. Sure. I don't see how it's not two words. But that said, Arlen, aren't two words? Could you have one word? One word means there's no spaces, right? Something is one word. Something. There's no space between some and thing.
That looks right. Thought leader, two different words. I'm going to go with that.
Even though AI tells you, yes, thought leader is one word.
I'm not controlled by AI, and I'm sure you're not either.
No, I'm resentful of AI, if you want to know the truth. All right, Arlen, I want to get to democracy's dirty little secret. I really, really do. But you mentioned one way that Harris could maybe kind of do a little better in the polling is by being a little more, pointed in her responses, maybe separating herself from Joe Biden a little bit. And this was an article that actually was posted a few weeks ago in the Times, but you make the case, and I think you're right, of course, it's still very, very pertinent. It's not as though Harris has changed her style. So this is from Todd Purdom. He used to work for the GOP, so I guess he's one of those heroes. He's the Times calls them anyway, heroes, Republicans who support Harris. He's questionable, but I think she does answer them, Arlen. She just answers them in ways that a lot of people don't like. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I want her to be stronger. I want her to be more assertive. I want her to, separate herself from Biden. Trump gets all the headlines. I want Kamala to get a few more headlines. I want her to answer tough questions and, get in the news more, because right now Trump just dominates. Everything he says, he dominates the news, and people see, it doesn't seem to hurt him a bit. So I'd like Kamala to just get out there and say something controversial, something different. Like I say, more sympathetic toward the civilians in Gaza. I just don't want her to be another Joe Biden.
But what if her views really are the same as Biden's? What if I heard Tim Black, he's another podcaster, he has a slightly bigger audience than I do, sadly for me, but good for him. He made the point that she doesn't separate herself from Biden because she doesn't really, this is what Tim Black says, not Hal. This is what he says, but I don't disagree with this. He says the problem for her is she doesn't really have any deep value. She doesn't really have any strong beliefs on anything. She just wants to get elected. And so if she said, well, I do disagree with Joe on this, or we feel differently on that, she'd have to answer the next question, which is why. And according to Tim Black, she can't answer that question because she doesn't really care. Like, she doesn't care. According to him, she doesn't care about civilians being killed in Gaza. It doesn't matter to her. She doesn't care about workers in the Midwest. She just, those aren't concerns of hers.
Well, I don't know how you know that. I mean, in 2020, she was a lot more progressive and got in trouble maybe for saying things that, taking positions that are maybe more progressive than others. She was against fracking. She was, more, I think, of a progressive back then. And now she's kind of decided to, weaken herself a little bit and get more toward the center. And I just don't think that's helping or working right now.
You made a great point, Arlen. I thought this was very, very interesting anyway, provocative. And I think it's true, but so I said great, but you're saying part of the problem that Harris faces is that Trump is getting the lion's share of the media attention. I don't know for certain that's true, although I suspect it is, including, by the way, attention from ostensible or certainly declared Harris allies. The New York Times has endorsed her in a full-throated editorial that went so far as to say, if you vote for Trump, you're unpatriotic. MSNBC obviously supports Harris. CNN obviously supports Harris. but they seem to be putting at least as much attention on Trump. So why would they do that if they really want Harris to win?
Well, we know that just Trump always gets attention no matter what he does. It just comes with the territory, and he says crazier and more outrageous things all the time, and he lies bigger and bigger, and demonizes immigrants and foreigners, and you can't ignore that. I mean, and if Harris wants to just be real cautious and moderate, then she's not going to get the same kind of headlines that Trump is going to get. So that's why I wanted her to step away from her safe positions and maybe take a few braver positions.
Well, the Times has made so you're okay. Just to be a little, the playbook that I see from the Democrats and from the liberal media, so-called, is to demonize Trump, to make everyone believe, as many people as they can possibly believe, that this guy is completely unacceptable. He's beyond the pale. He's a monster. And therefore, you have to vote for Harris. And that's worked with you. I mean, you adopt that position clearly. But it's not working for many millions of Americans.
Well, to tell you one thing that I've noticed, I think the way people feel about Kamala is often because of how she is portrayed in the media. Especially the right-wing media, that they're pouring lots of money, I think, into the swing states, demonizing her and saying how bad she is. And I think people might be actually scared of her because they believe a lot of the things that Trump and the right wing say, and that she could be really dangerous for the country. And it's hard for her to prevent, all this, billions of dollars of advertising that are so negative against her.
It goes both ways. As far as I know, I could be wrong. The Democrats actually have more money to spend than the Republicans. I could be wrong about that. I know Musk has put billions, but she has her billionaires too. So I don't know.
Hard to say, because then that's what my big picture report commentary is about. The fact that there is no limit as to what billionaires can decide to put into the race. And I don't think we have any real knowledge until maybe later how much they're actually putting in, because they can get away with not even being responsible.
It's terrible. It's terrifying. It's clear we don't have a democracy. There's no question about that. But I think that's an argument, as you've made, for her to be much bolder, for her to stand out, for her to step out, for her to say, no, this is wrong what Israel's doing. We can't support this any further. I think that is a way for her to cut through. But that said, it does entail risk. And she's one thing that we know about Kamala Harris. We don't know whether she cares about human beings, but we do know she is very, very risk averse. She's always been. She pulled back on her anti-fracking stance because the billionaires didn't like it. She pulled back on her pro-Medicare for all stance because the billionaires didn't like it. Didn't get her any votes, but she's not going to gore any rich person's ox. Let's hear from Barack Obama. He has an explanation for why Trump isn't doing worse in the polls. I want your thoughts, Arlen.
Okay.
Because you think that's a sign of strength? Because that's what being a man is? Putting women down? That's not acceptable.
All right, so that I didn't get the whole clip. Let me get more of that in, Arlen, because again I was scrambling. That's the very end. But here, this is from CNN. Abby Phillip reporting.
For black men.
Part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for them. And so now you're thinking about sitting out or even supporting somebody who has a history of denigrating you because you think that's a sign of strength, because That's what being a man is? Putting women down?
All right, so he's getting a lot of criticism for that, but what do you think, Arlen? You think that was the right tack for Obama to take if his goal is to elect Kamala Harris, to scold black men who are maybe leaning towards Trump at this point as potentially sexist or, I don't know, self-hating black people?
Yeah, I don't know if that really helps Harris. I think I'd like to see Obama out there more, just in general, just to show that she is, worthy of his support. Same with Clinton and any other popular Democrat. They've got to get out there and show that they're totally behind her. And because otherwise, the people are just accepting whatever Trump says and not really penalizing him for it. That puts a lot of pressure on Kamala to come up with something that, that'll catch the attention of the press and make people pay attention more and be more positive toward her.
Well, one thing I've noticed that Democrats tend to do, and I don't say that Republicans don't do this, but one thing I've noticed is that the Democrats are good at lecturing. They're good at telling other people what they should think or what they shouldn't. Paul Krugman writes a lot of columns telling working people that times are better than they think, that he doesn't know why they're concerned about the economy when the economy is going so well. And of course, he's a Nobel Prize winner in economics. So he should know better than, say, a factory worker whether times are good or not. Hillary Clinton said people aren't voting for her because they're deplorable. Now you hear Obama calling out black men. And he said brothers aren't feeling, he used the term brothers, eyed in. He said they're not feeling, some of them, a woman president. So my question is, why don't they make the case? Here's how Kamala Harris will make your life better. Here's how things will improve under Kamala Harris. Here's what Kamala Harris did in the past to make your life better. Why doesn't he make that argument?
Well, I would like to see, I'd like to see that argument made. I think there's a lot of, reasons to believe that things will get better under Harris. I mean, look at the latest economic news. It's really good, even though Trump will say it's horrible. And, there's just so many, reasons why, inflation is down, jobs are up, and yet Harris, Biden don't get the credit that they should. I don't see anything that the Republicans are doing that's going to help working people.
Well, we've talked about this. I mean, I think the tariffs that Trump trumpets, actually, there's no question those are good for domestic manufacturing, even as poorly implemented as he did in his first term. And one proof of that is that Biden kept them and actually expanded some of them. Harris has been unable to articulate even one example of a tariff she would keep. I think there's a lot of factors at play. I do agree with you, Arlen, that to an extent, Trump gets credit for an economy that wasn't as strong as people remember in retrospect, and Biden gets slammed for a for an economy that is better than it's being perceived. That said, there's no question housing costs are more out of reach than ever, and that's incredibly important. The number of homeless people is at a record level, or at least the last time there was a count, which I believe was in April of this year, it was at a record level. So there are a lot of things for people to be very, very worried about. People see these fossil-fueled hurricanes devastate swaths of the Southeast. And yes, Trump lies about whether there is aid, but at the same time, we are seeing hundreds of billions of our dollars going overseas to kill people. And I think that also is very, very upsetting to people. I think it makes many Americans question if our nation even has a soul. Doesn't mean that Trump would be better. It means that they look at what's happening under a Democratic president and they're very, very deeply troubled. Just as many were very deeply troubled when they looked around in 2020 and saw what was going on under a Republican president.
Well, you have to ask yourself, too, what are the Republicans going to do about any of these problems? They're not going to do anything that's going to be positive about abortion, about climate change, about health care. I mean, those things, people should be afraid they might lose their health care and their right, their rights as, women to do what they want to do with their own bodies. I think these are huge things, and I'm hoping that that'll motivate Democrats, especially Democratic women and young people, to come out and vote, because those things are not obviously guaranteed to happen unless Harris, is the candidate that is the president, because we don't know what the Republicans are going to do, but they're probably not going to, they're just not going to give the support to the working people that Democrats are likely to do.
All right, we're going to get into your piece in one more moment. I'm putting it up there, Democracy's Dirty Little Secret, the first two paragraphs by Arlen Grossman. Again, this is at thebigpicturereport.com. You made a point before we get into this, but it's related, of course, to your article. I think in some ways it may be actually more related to your article than even the presidential race, that Republicans are taking a lead in the race for the Senate. And I do think that big money often plays a more critical role, sometimes even in down ballot races when voters know less about candidates. Maybe there's newcomers that they haven't really fully vetted beforehand. So I think this is a major problem. And I was a little surprised because, at least in my state, Maryland, the Democrat who would be, the current incumbent, who's Ben Cardin, is stepping down. He's a Democrat. The Democrat now has a pretty sizable lead, Angela Alsobrooks. This race was considered a potential Republican pickup. So I'm surprised, but I guess at least Montana has kind of moved away from the Republican Democrats, right? And do you think the big money is playing a role in that as well, in the state races as well as nationally?
I suspect it is. I think the Republicans seem to really concentrate on the down ballot races. They're able to just, either, well, in this case, right now, they're just barely behind the Democrats in the Senate, and it looks like they may actually win the Senate. And I don't know what's going to happen in the House either, but I'm sure, Republicans are pouring lots of money into that to make sure that Democrats don't make any progress there. It could be, actually, if things go worst of all, that the Republicans will win the presidency and both houses of Congress. And I don't even want to think about that. That's just a nightmare.
Yeah, it is very scary, Arlen. I don't disagree. The reason I'm very troubled. I'll say it that way. I'm troubled because whatever outcome we get, I foresee worse times ahead. I'm not convinced, like you are, that it would be that much worse if Trump is elected. And that's not because I don't think Trump would be that bad. I think Trump would be that bad, but I just also think, frankly, Harris would be that bad too.
Well, I think it's going to be bad for the country no matter what happens, just because the way things are set up, so that all the rich people, the billionaires, the corporations, they're using their clout to get what they want. And the money is not going downward, so that working people are not being helped, unions are not being helped. And those things aren't going to happen, certainly with Trump. Maybe they'll happen with Kamala, but there's just so many things wrong in this country right now.
Well, why not then, and I keep saying this, given that we agree, why can't we, meaning not just you and me, but why can't those of us who I think really do care about our country and have good, have recognized the importance of reasonably equitable and equal wealth and income distribution, peace, environmental protections, and why can't we unite behind a candidate who really does share our values? Is it the money? Is it that the money has made it impossible for people to say we have to vote for Jill Stein? Because I would say it's the money that means we do have to vote for Jill Stein.
Yeah, you make a good point. She would be a good candidate who could make a difference. But like you say, the big money is not going to let her win. They're going to push her down and make sure that she doesn't win. So, because they want to keep what they've got. And, so
why don't we get to decide who wins? I don't understand. I understand how influential money is. I understand all the TV ads. I understand all the lawn signs. I get all of that. What I don't understand, and I frankly, unlike you, I do understand why people vote for Donald Trump. But what I don't understand is why together we can't build a movement to elect somebody good.
Well, yeah, you have to decide who is good, because this country is not getting more progressive. It's getting, in many ways, more conservative, and kind of afraid of immigration, afraid of new changes, gender roles, things like that. People have gotten, they've gotten scared, and so I don't see a progressive movement that's happening right now. And I wish there was. I'd like to see people more inclined to be progressive, but there's just so many red states and so many conservatives out there that I just don't see how it would happen.
All right, Arlen Grossman with us on the morning show. Well, I call it the morning show. It used to be the morning show. It's now Halitics. And it's not even the morning. It's in the afternoon. I sort of trickled back into my old habits, very, very old. I do want to hear from you, and I know Arlen does too. Arlen really likes the calls, likes to know that people are listening, watching. 240-242-5646. What did I miss in your Democracy's Dirty Little Secrets? I only got the first two paragraphs here, Arlen, but what do you really want to highlight for people?
Well, think about it. We, all of us are inundated with, pleas for more money from Kamala, and from every candidate, and yet, people think, oh well, I'll give them $50, I'll give them $100, that'll make a difference. But unfortunately, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference, because billionaires could put in as much money as they want. The Supreme Court has decided that there is no limit, that corporations are able to get the same rights, the same Bill of Rights as ordinary people. So, under those kind of circumstances, I just don't see, how things are going to change very much. As long as money rules, as long as money is able to give commercials and advertising, power, that it's a joke to think that the average person is going to make a difference with their kind of money compared to people like Elon Musk and other billionaires.
I'm with you, man. And this is something that I find frustrating, is all the support from progressives for Harris, making phone calls for her and the like, without getting one concession, without getting one promise from her. Whereas those billionaires that you're talking about, Arlen, they wouldn't give anyone a penny unless they had ironclad certainty that their pet issue is going to be addressed in the way that they like by the candidate to whom they give money. So that's one of the biggest reasons I'm very concerned, among many reasons. I mean, her history, but I'm concerned about Harris because, for example, Mark Cuban, who is a big backer of hers, is very much against this Lena Khan, who is one of the few real progressives in the Biden administration. She is the director of the antitrust division of the Justice Department, and she's really gone after corporate malefactors. Billionaires don't like that because they own the corporate malefactors. And he has been whispering in her ear, and not even whispering, saying loudly, you got to get rid of Lena Khan. And I just wonder what she's told Cuban and maybe the other billionaires, the other tech bros like Reed Hastings, who also have enormous gobs of money at their disposal and have put it in her lap.
Well, I like to think that, she has a progressive background. I think she's gone through, attorney general in California. She's, been a senator, and she's had basically, democratic progressive views all through her life, as far as I can tell. So I see no reason to not believe that she could actually become show her more progressive side if she got elected. That's what I'm hoping. And certainly, if she doesn't get elected, I think we're definitely heading toward the right, and it's going to be really bad.
Sheryl Sandberg, a Facebook billionaireess who famously did the mostly debunked documentary Screams Without Words, highlighting the plight of alleged plight of Israeli victims of Hamas sexual assaults, is also a staunch backer of Stein. She's given much money to Stein. Doesn't that support suggest that she's comfortable, is Sheryl Sandberg, that Harris will not actually step up and stop the Israeli genocide?
We've spoken in the past, Hal, about, unfortunately, we have our limits. We only have 2 candidates to pretty much vote for, where other countries like in Europe, you have 5 or 6 parties. And I think we desperately need that here, because otherwise it's just, if you have just Democrats and Republicans, nothing's going to really change much. The rich people will have the power, and it'll just be a question of just, a little bit to the left for the Democrats, more to the right for the Republicans. And, I'd like to see some Green Party candidates, some independent type candidates that, will do things differently, because, this country needs a lot of change.
Arlen, you also highlighted this story, and I know I've been peppering you with questions, so you should feel free to turn it around and start asking me challenging cross-examination questions that are designed to put me on the spot. Even if you don't have my lawyerly training, I know you're just as capable as I am of doing that. But let's get to this article real quick. But again, anytime you want to flip it around and say, well, Hal, you talk a big game about Jill Stein, but do you really want to be responsible for electing Donald Trump? That would be a question I might ask me if I was trying to embarrass me. This election will need more heroes. So what is the New York Times editorial board talking about in yesterday's, or 2 days ago, I guess? This was probably put up Saturday evening in yesterday's newspaper.
They're talking about the Republican Party and the things that they're doing to make voting more difficult for Democratic type voters. They're making it so it's harder to cast ballots, for the ballots to count. They're trying to eliminate voters. They've always felt that they can't win the popular vote, and that's pretty much been the case all these years. So they're trying to think of ways that they can, change the system a little bit to help them and make it more difficult. Because, this states could do whatever they want. They can make up their own rules, and the ones that are controlled by Republicans are, making voting very difficult for those who would likely vote Democrat. So those are the kind of heroes we need. Is more Republicans will say, no, this is wrong. We can't do this. It's immoral. It's not proper. And there are a few Republicans who are saying that, but not enough. They're pretty much.
Yeah, they say the article cites Brad Raffensperger, who is the Secretary of State of Georgia. And of course, he stood up in 2020 and said to Trump, those votes aren't there. You lost Georgia, is what he told Trump. And he deserves all the credit in the world for that. It was true. There was no evidence of any tampering by anybody, right? I mean, the vote was the vote. The vote in Georgia was for Biden, period. End of story, no matter what Trump might have said. Raffensperger is definitely a Republican. Raffensperger, for example, rejected a suit to block Trump from the ballot because he participated in an insurrection. There's lawsuits brought to keep Trump off the ballot in a number of states, including Georgia. And Raffensperger said, no, I'm not going to do that. And I actually agree with Raffensperger on that. I think the decision who should be on the ballot should be left to the voters. If Trump had been convicted of insurrection, I would say differently, but he wasn't. So, and if you want to blame someone for that, blame Democrats, at least the Justice Department, for not prosecuting him earlier. But also, you could blame the Supreme Court too, because they stopped that suit. Regardless, it's a tough nut. But I agree, Raffensperger deserves a lot of credit. Go ahead, Arlen. You were about to say something.
Think about this. Trump had Pence as his vice president. And Pence, he hoped Pence would go along with his idea to nullify the election and give it to Trump. And it didn't work because Pence had a little bit of, integrity that he wouldn't do that. But suppose it was J.D. Vance who was in the Pence position and said, well, yeah, let's move the outcome of the election to the House and let the House decide. That would be huge because the Republicans would have all the advantage in a position like that. So in other words, what I'm saying is that there's going to be a lot more pro-Trump Republicans in there coming if he won the election this time, and there won't be people like Brett Raffensperger who would have as much power as we'd like them to have. So,
Arlen, when you look at the polls and how close it is and their very real likelihood, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but you tell me if I'm wrong. My sense is you're perplexed and you, to a degree, are angry at the voters, you're angry at the media, you're angry at Trump for lying. What I don't hear from you, and maybe you do say it, I do hear it a little bit, but I don't hear from you what real palpable anger at the Democratic Party for putting us in this position. And that's where I am right now. I feel that if they had if there had been a real nominating process, it was clear that Biden was demented. You said this long before the election, got going, the re-election campaign got going. You were saying this for quite a long time. And the Democratic establishment, the elites, they just rolled with Biden. They prevented anyone else from entering who had a real chance. There were a couple of kind of vanity candidates, Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. Early on, Jr. dropped out, of course, to run as an independent and then to join the Trump campaign. I mean, don't the Democratic elites, the Hakeem Jeffries, the Chuck Schumers, the Barack Obamas, don't they deserve an awful lot of the blame for this happening?
They do. They should get a lot of the blame, as should the Republicans. And I'll challenge you, Hal. What do you think will improve if we elect Republicans? I mean, are they going to change any of the things that bother you now? I don't think so.
I think there is a chance, yes, that if Trump were elected, that the war in Ukraine would end. And that would be very, very good. It's been incredibly costly, both in lives and also, of course, in money. And it's led to the wholesale destruction of large swaths of Ukraine. So I think that would be some place where I know you and I disagree strongly on this, but I would feel better about that particular important issue if Trump were elected. I do think there's a chance if Trump were elected, he would really push much more aggressively than he did in the first term for higher tariffs and to restrain, quote, free, unquote, trade, which would be good for working people. So I think those are two areas where we would likely see some improvement. I think in many areas it would get worse. I think in terms of any chances for more health care for Americans, that would get worse. I think that, school lunch programs, I was hearing the due distance bros talk about that, would be much worse. I don't see there would be any real meaningful change in Israel in policy with respect to the Middle East. I think it'd be about as bad as it is now. I don't see how it could get worse, but I don't see Trump making things any less awful either when it comes to the Middle East. Although he did pull us out of, he started the process of pulling us out of Afghanistan. I fear he might even be more bellicose with respect to Iran. That was one of his worst areas. I fear fascism. I fear full-blown fascism if Trump were elected. So I don't think things on balance would be better if Trump were elected, and I'm not going to vote for Trump.
Okay, well, fair enough. I would hope you wouldn't. You could vote for Stein, but it's not going to do you any good. But foreign policy, I think, is something we should think about too, because Trump has been very critical of NATO. If he pulled out of Ukraine, if he had peace there that in which Ukraine would lose territory, I think those would all be bad things for this country. And another thing that kind of concerns me, if Trump got elected, he would join forces with people like Viktor Orban and all the other autocrats, and and I think it would change how Europeans feel about us, how people around the world feel about us. And of course, there's China, there's Russia, there's North Korea. We just don't know what Trump is capable of doing, because he's shown a lot of empathy for Putin and North Korea, and given them, he's friendlier to all these autocrats and dictators than Harris would be.
Yeah, that sort of stuff, that doesn't really go very far with me. I'm not concerned about Putin in the least. I look at Russia, and I think a lot of ways they're a paper tiger. The Russian bear is not a big, powerful grizzly or polar bear. It's kind of a flaccid, old black bear that can't do much harm. And even, you look at the end of World War II, when the Russian army, I guess, was the biggest in the world, it took all of their forces to defeat the Nazis, a much smaller country. They almost lost. So even when Russia was at its peak, the Russian, was a big, powerful empire, presumably. And even then, it could barely defeat the Germans. It did. I mean, and good. I'm glad they did. I'm glad they were able to defeat the Nazis. But Russia can't defeat Ukraine. Russia could not. I was talking to my son about Israel. We're talking about Israel. I said, Israel is the most powerful army in the world except for the United States. And he said, he says, no, they're not. And I said, well, what's more powerful? And he said, well, the UK. I thought, you're right. The UK does have a more powerful military than Israel. So even if you are comparing with non-US armies, Russia's probably third, fourth, something like that, including in Europe. The French have a very powerful military. The Germans have not much, I guess, but they have something. I don't fear Russia. I think Trump is right to pivot to China. China is the bigger worry, I believe, in this world. And I think we need to keep them under wraps. I think Trump's tariffs, if he really imposes them, are the best way to keep China from becoming too powerful. Their economy has grown dramatically by huge leaps and bounds as a direct result of democratic free trade policies, specifically the most favored nation status that Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton championed. That has been devastating for our country. So your arguments about Trump, that doesn't really sway me. I am swayed by the fear of fascism, yes, at home. I am absolutely. But I wouldn't vote for him anyway, because he's not a progressive. He's for cutting taxes on the rich. There's many areas where I strongly disagree with Trump. And he's a demagogue, and he's not a Democrat in a small d. But I don't, on a lot of these issues, think of him think that he's as bad as you do.
Well, obviously, China is huge, and they're going to be a force we have to reckon with for a long time, economically and militarily, especially if they go after Taiwan. So, but I think we would be better off if the United States kind of was in the lead with the help of all the countries in NATO. I think they're a powerful force. If Trump were in there, then he would make sure. In that case, Russia would be a lot better off, and I don't think that's a good thing. And I think it'd be we'd be better off if the United States took a strong stand with the help of Europe and other NATO countries. If Trump decided to make NATO disappear, that the forces of NATO disappear, that would be a bad thing. I think we need a united front, and I think the United States has to be in the lead for that, and they wouldn't be with Trump.
Well, I think if NATO were a force, a truly pro-democracy force, not a true Western corporate force, I would feel differently. But I don't see it that way. I think if we want to lead the world or be a leader among other leaders, such as Western Europe, then we need to stand for true justice. And I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing that at all. I'm seeing us prolonging a terrible war that's destroying Ukraine. And also many, many Russian soldiers are also being killed. I'm seeing us promoting genocide, and now even war, and beyond that, now war in Lebanon and potentially war in Iran that are terrible for the world. I heard a very interesting commenter from Africa saying that the U.S. is completely wrong, that the U.S. and its Western allies think that the wars that we're fighting, whether in Israel, or how we're supporting Israel or how we're supporting Ukraine, we think this is the right thing. But the rest of the world is looking on in horror that we have made ourselves pariahs, that we're only able to impose our will through brute force and nothing else. So and that's not Trump. That's not Trump policies. Those are Democratic policies.
I don't think the rest of the world really wants Russia to win Ukraine and take over that country. I just don't think that's, likely. But if Trump were to get elected, that just might happen. Well,
I don't think it. See, this is where I'm cutting you off for just a sec, Arlen, because I think you present a false choice. I don't agree with you that it's either Russia conquers Ukraine or Ukraine pushes Russia out of Ukraine altogether. There are many other alternatives. And I think what the world is seeing is the U.S. promoting this war, pushing for more killing, rather than doing everything it can with China and India to promote peace now, to end the killing.
It seems to me the United States is just trying to, help Ukraine keep its own country. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think the rest of the world would appreciate the fact that Ukraine is an independent, sovereign country and shouldn't be invaded for no reason. So
But there were reasons, Arlen. There were absolutely reasons. The U.S. was pushing along with NATO to include Ukraine as part of NATO. The U.S. had destabilized a more pro-Russian regime 10 years ago now and installed Zelensky ultimately, who wasn't even that pro-West. I mean, he wanted peace. He was negotiating with Russia as late as the spring of 22, after Russia had started the attack. And we dispatched Boris Johnson to stop negotiations. Blinken has said no to any kind of negotiations. You and I discussed this over a year ago, where Blinken said in Finland, until Russia withdraws to pre-22 borders at a minimum, there's no negotiations. Well, that's not the way to get to peace. You get to peace as you sit down and you talk right now and you say, okay, how do we end the killing right now? But the U.S. won't do that. We're pushing just the opposite.
Well, we just want to make sure that Putin doesn't get what he wants. And Putin wants control over another country. And the United States says, that can't happen. The rest of Europe, I think, leads the same way. It shouldn't happen, can't happen. I think we have an obligation to Ukraine to stand up with them and help them defeat those who are aggressive toward them.
Well, Ukraine's losing the war. And even if somehow right now it's losing, right now Russian military is actually advancing. But even if in the end they somehow, quote, win, they'll have lost, I don't know how many, probably over 1 million dead in a very small country with the land. Again, I always say that phrase, but it's true. It's laid waste. I mean, it's like there's just shells of buildings blown up. Fields are now landmined. I mean, this war has been disastrous for Ukraine, and it didn't have to happen this way. The U.S. could have been pushing for peace very, very early on and gotten a better result.
I don't think Ukraine, had much chance at all, because Putin decided, I'm going to invade you and I'm going to take you over, and they were not. At one time they had nuclear weapons, and they decided to give them up. I think about some decade or two ago, and then so they're pretty much they can't defend themselves against a country like Russia. And I don't think our goal is to destroy Russia. I think our goal is to just make sure that Russia can't be any more aggressive and move toward attacking any other countries and try to take them over.
They're not going to. How could they attack other countries? They can't even take over. They can't even beat Ukraine, for crying out loud. Or they can't without tremendous loss of men and terrible impact on their country as well. But I think what you're saying just isn't borne out by the facts. There really, really was meaningful negotiations between Russia and Ukraine early on, and they were close on a number of issues and very well could have resolved it, especially if the United States had pushed for peace. Instead, neocon Victoria Nuland and Harris and Biden and Boris Johnson decided there's not going to be peace. So I think the truth is there really were some real opportunities there. And Anthony Blinken decided, no, there's not going to be peace. And they haven't pushed for peace ever since. They've done just the opposite.
I haven't seen, those kind of negotiations, or I don't know about those kind of negotiations you're talking about. I just know that it was totally, Putin's decision. He decided by himself that he wanted to go in there and take over that country, and he had no reason, he had no right. It was illegal, it was immoral, and if we don't stand up to that, then he'll just.
But Arlen, we've done so much of the same. We totally destabilized Haiti. Hillary, when she was Secretary of State, she helped a military coup to depose a socialist and install a military junta. That's done terrible damage to Honduras. When Russia was sending missiles to Cuba, we said, no, you can't put those missiles there. So those are all the same things that Russia did, although perhaps what we did was more aggressive, more destabilizing even.
I think there's almost nothing positive to say about either country when it comes to foreign policy. The United States has made, horrible mistakes, backed the wrong side, made things a lot worse for many other countries. And Russia's certainly not helping other countries. So, it's, I don't see anybody good in this. I just see a lot of countries that are, trying to help themselves, but not trying to, get world peace. Let's put it that way.
All right, let me just put this headline on real quick. And it's from the New York Times. And so, it doesn't prove my point exactly, but I just want to show it because I think it's relevant. See if I can, see if we can get that there. So let's see if we can put this because I think it's really important. Because I wasn't ready for this, but it's really, I really do urge you, if you get a chance, to at least do a little research on this. So here, this is from your New York Times. This is June 15, 2024. And what The Guardian reported at about the same time is that during these negotiations, and there was a lot of agreement on, the Donbass, which is the Russian-speaking area in the east, that some of that would become demilitarized, but it was Russian, but it wouldn't become occupied by Russia. That the other portions of Ukraine, even those that Russian army had overrun, would be returned to Ukraine, that Ukraine would agree not to become part of NATO, which seems eminently reasonable since NATO is an anti-Russia organization. But there was no talk. There's been no talking since.
Yeah,
There should be talking, Arlen, and there isn't.
Yeah, if they were having those kind of talks back in 2022, I'm not aware of them, and I think we should have done everything we could to make sure that this, all this horrible violence didn't happen, but it has. There's, the cost to Ukraine, the cost to Russia has been very, very high, as all wars are. So yeah, I mean, I'm all for a negotiated settlement, but I don't want to see Ukraine give up their territory to Russian aggression.
So before we go, Arlen, one of the concerns I've mentioned before, and we'll get your last word always, is that the Democratic Party seems to want to point fingers and blame everyone but itself for its problems. So you see Obama blaming black men for being supposedly, I guess he doesn't use the word sexist, but he implies strongly that it's because Harris is a woman. They're not strongly supporting her, at least not as strongly as black men supported him in 2008. And he seems unable to acknowledge, well, maybe my policies weren't that good. Maybe having a black president wasn't that great for black people after all. And so they're not they're not feeling it like they were under me because I was new, I was a novelty, I campaigned to the left, and I didn't govern to the left. So, he doesn't question whether maybe he's part of the problem. Now we're seeing, and Tom Hartman wrote about this, he wrote a very aggressive attack column against Jill Stein. She's also the target of an ad by the DNC. Do you think that's a smart move by the Democrats?
There's a lot of problems the Democrats have among certain kind of groups, especially right now. Gender is the biggest one, I think. Men are attracted to Trump for some reason, and women are more attracted to Harris. So I think it's all going to come down to who's motivated to get out there to the polls and vote. I'm hoping that a lot of maybe men will say, I'm not even going to bother, but women will think, wow, we've got to, if we're going to keep our rights to have, do what we want to do with our own bodies, well, we better come out and vote for Harris. And I'm hoping young people will do the same. But and that's what it's going to come down to, how it's going to be motivation and how much work will be done to get things done, and then that's going to make the difference in the election, I think.
You have any predictions?
I don't. It's just too crazy. The one prediction I'll give you is that if it's close, it's going to be even, there's going to be so much violence and hatred and division. The Republicans are just not going to obviously give up if for some reason Harris wins by a little bit.
All right, any final word, Arlen?
I'm just worried, and I want to see the Democrats work harder. I want to see Kamala come out stronger, and I want to see the polls move in the direction more in Harris's favor, of course.
All right, I'm worried too, Arlen. We'll leave it at that. Have a great week. We'll see you next Monday.
All right, great, Hal. Take care.